Sony busted out the big guns in its latest State of Play, showing off a bunch of games headlined by a few star franchises. Welcome to the Inside Games Daily. This is your second episode of the day, and we just watched the State of Play. Lawrence and I just came off the State of Play. Are you excited for all video games all the time now, Lawrence?
I am. Yeah, I'm going to be brave enough to say that was a pretty good State of Play. If anything, I think return to form is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but I think specifically PlayStation identified certain factors that they have correlated with success in the past, and I think they wanted to remind everyone that they still make those kinds of games and they're coming pretty quickly. But yeah, to that point, the show did open with a deep look at Wolverine from Insomniac Games, confirming that Logan won't be alone and that other mutants will play a role in the story. It's coming out September 15th. Who was your favorite mutant, Brian?
Oh my God, all-time Gambit. I'm a Gambit guy. But yeah, it looked awesome. I thought this was Sony being, I don't know, PS4 era kick-ass Sony. We then moved to a wide slate of first and third party games, positioning PlayStation's lineup as, we got the mix of the big franchises, new IP, and they're definitely looking to, like Lawrence said, show like, look, we're still the first party guys, here it is.
Key announcements included Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, a fighting game from Arc System Works launching August 6th, along with Rayman, Legends Retold, and Bancho, the Chef. That's a spin-off from Dave the Diver.
The other major inclusions are Phantom Blade Zero, Dune Awakening with a console release date and a solo play option, No Rest for the Wicked, and Dynasty Warriors 3 Complete Edition Remastered.
We also got several action and horror titles. Onimusha, Way of the Sword, that releases September 25th. Silent Hill, Townfall, September 24th. Control Resident, also September 24th. And Lawrence, get excited, Ace Combat 8, Wings of Thieves, which is targeting a September to October release window.
Lawrence is very, very excited, as am I. The presentation also highlighted new or more experimental titles like Hollywood Stuntman. That's gonna be fun. I think maybe Stuntman Hollywood is probably more what that is. Ill. I thought it said 3 in the script. It's Ill. ILL. Yeah. And RuneScape Dragon Wild's coming to PS5 alongside ongoing updates, of course, for Marathon.
Yeah, Brian, are you penciling in some alone time with RuneScape Dragon Wilds, or are you sold on it?
I haven't played it. I'm more of an old school RuneScape, but I'll try it. Yeah, it's their new kind of action-y one, so yeah, sure.
All right, and the show closed with a major gameplay trailer for a new God of War entry, God of War Lao Fei, which is focused on Fei, that's Kratos' wife, showing her capture and setting up a darker narrative angle in an ancient Egyptian setting, underscoring Sony's push to end the showcase on one of its biggest franchises.
Yeah, all these games Sony really, really needs a hit because its first-party game sales have been trending downward for years, and the company's latest financial results show just how dramatic that decline has been.
Yeah, we got some data released by Sony thanks to the folks at GameFile who compiled it. The company sold 32.1 million first-party games across the PS4 and PS5 between April 2025 and March 2026. That seems great. No, it's not. Here's the bad news. Compared to 5 years ago, that was a drop of more than 26 million games.
And that was when they were on fire. That was kind of like Marvel Spider-Man territory and The Last of Us. I think they had launched like 5 remasters in 1 year. So they've cooled off a little bit since then. Sony actually hit a high point during a 12-month stretch between spring 2020 and winter 2021. Well, yeah, it's COVID. Everything was bustling back then. That's when they sold 58.4 million first-party games. That includes major hits such as The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, as well as the launch of the PS5 in general.
So if you fast forward several years and the picture looks very, very different here. Despite releases such as Astrobot, which won the Game of the Year, and Ghost of Yotei, Sony's first-party sales are still far below their previous highs. That could be attributed to COVID, but also I don't think that Sony wants to see these numbers at 26 million less than 2021.
Yeah, and that also, just the downward slope might reinforce a concern among some PlayStation fans who have had throughout the current generation that while Sony continues to sell millions of consoles, they spent years acquiring studios, they haven't really produced the same number of big first-party hits that really defined previous years, and that definitely seemed what this State of Play was aimed at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think those years were spent chasing a raft of games as service games, most of which never ended up coming out. So yeah, a lot of money just kind of thrown after projects that didn't amount to sales because they didn't amount to products. Now, we should say, of course, again, an important caveat here, Sony's best year coincided with COVID-19, as a lot of video game companies did, yeah. A lot of lockdowns around the world led to an absolute surge in video game spending. It's retracted a little since then. I think a lot of people are happy that it's kind of settled out higher than they expected it to land, but still, it's rolled back a little now that people can actually go outside.
But GameFile notes that overall game sales on PlayStation platforms have not fallen at the same rate as Sony's first-party releases. That's the important part. So it's not just the post-pandemic hangover, which the whole industry has been suffering from for the last few years. It is that Sony is not selling as many first-party games as maybe they should be.
Yeah, it was a drop of like 26 million. That's almost half. That is well more than the retraction that anyone saw post-COVID. Sales receded by about 10 to 20%, I want to say. This is all just informal stuff, but yeah, I was keeping an eye on it. So yeah, I really just think it's because Sony hasn't released any products that really ignite people's excitement. Just a lot of sequels, if they do get the sequels out, things like Spider-Man 2 or Ghost of Yotei, that look like or even God of War Ragnarok, they kind of seem just like a bigger, maybe even noisier version of the thing before. And I think people, especially now that, again, since post-COVID, we're in a game flood, we're just wash and choice, that it seems like a game that seems similar to one you've already played. It doesn't rank as high on your priority queue as something that's new and exciting and unique.
Yeah, we were talking about this on stream. Lawrence and I were talking about this on stream, but like the fact that they are way down in first-party sales and now they're like, all right, now we're only selling on a PlayStation. We're not selling on PC, which is kind of shocking because I think they're assuming that the God of Wars and their Intergalactics are going to sell consoles. They think that they can make more money on the console sales that they then have to sell in order to get the first-party releases up. So there's a lot of big ifs there that I don't necessarily know they're going to be able to deliver on in the next, I guess, 3 to 4 years.
Part of me just worries that they're kind of playing an old game a little bit, and in this games of service as a service world that we live in, that can you make all your money with these big first party games that have only gotten more and more expensive, so they're big gambles. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope like Wolverine's a huge hit and they have some big ones, but it feels a little bit old-fashioned to me, and I can't really verbalize why, but I think it's so crowded, and I feel like everybody's kind of got their games that they play, and it's tough for any new game, and when they cost hundreds of millions of dollars now, I'm a little bit worried.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid and super insightful. Yeah, it seems like Sony wanted to communicate that they're still the 2019 PlayStation, but it's not 2019 anymore. And the things that worked back then, yes, you could dazzle people with a very high profile, high budget, minimally interactive sequence of Peter Parker flipping through, photorealistic Manhattan. That was enough to wow people and get them to buy consoles. Now that, Brian, as you said, we're just swimming in high profile games that are constantly hitting us with bombast. It's not as unique as it used to be. So when their PlayStation's going back and being like, hey, remember that thing? I'm not sure that it's going to help them stand out in the way that it used to. But we'll see. Kind of like Bruce was saying, I want these games to succeed. I do like me some big, expensive, dumb games. And Wolverine, God of War, calling them dumb is a little unfair, but it's going to be a lot of screaming and explosions, and that's kind of what I consider like a dumb game. So I'm into it. I love it whenever just fire hoses of money are pointed at me by big console manufacturers. So that's what I look forward to in those games. But yeah, I think people are kind of exhausted of that, weirdly.
At the end of State of Play, too, they are showing, I guess, the release years for their games. It was like 2026, 2027. God of War said in development. So that means that we're not getting that game in even 2027. That's probably a 2028, maybe, if we're lucky, 2028. And so this is, again, that's a huge bet for years and years and years, hundreds of millions of dollars to get to pass this down the line and be like, well, I hope it sells more consoles in 2028. Like, the PS5 is going to be long in the tooth around that time. Maybe they have the PS6 in 2028, but the PS6 people aren't going to buy that for God of War Lao Fei. Like, no way. So this is a very strange spot that Sony finds themselves in right now because they blew so much time on those live service games. There's 5 years of live service just money burning. That is just really, really put them in a really terrible spot.
I'm surprised there weren't ashes sprinkling down in front of the presenters during the state of play. Yeah, from all the money they burn. It does fit. This is maybe a weird analogy, but I do kind of think of like the old Hollywood studios, and by like the 60s, like the big epics like Ten Commandments and stuff that cost $1 bazillion just weren't selling tickets, and like they almost went out of business. Like they had to basically turn it over to Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and all these sort of essentially indie filmmakers and say, do something the kids are going to want to see. And so, you know, you look at the newer stuff like Mina the Hollower and all that, and it's like, I don't know, there's just so much choice out there. It's just, even from 5 years ago. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like they're definitely going back to the old playbook. They're like, screw it, let's do it. Like this is what we're known for. So I really do hope it works for them though.
I think it's part of their strategy. Kind of like Bruce was saying, no, people probably aren't going to buy a PS6 to play God of War Lao Fei, especially if it'll run on a PS5. But people will buy a PlayStation 6 because it's the kind of console that gets games like God of War Lao Fei. At least that's what PlayStation believes is their power and their sales. And that's also why I think they've chosen to go back to console exclusivity to reinforce that association of prestige. But yeah, have we moved out of that? Is that no longer trendy? It's possible. We've had 10 years of those kinds of games, and that is so. PlayStation may be able to reinforce that association, but I don't know if that association sells consoles anymore. I don't think anyone knows what sells consoles anymore. Kind of like what Brian was saying. So yeah, and now it's just we just get and in a similar way you kind of see it in the sales in the games that explode. No one can say why, and no one can. Any attempt to recreate it also was like, boring. We've seen that before. So yeah, there's really no formula anymore, and that's what makes spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a game that comes out 7 years down the line an increasingly just impossible prospect.
Yeah, they might be playing a losing game. We've been saying for a long time the consoles are kind of going the way of the dinosaur. They haven't yet, but this is a really strange spot for the console war right now. So whether or not Helix knocks it out of the park or the PS6 knocks it out, who knows? None of it looks good. I will say that. Thank you very much for watching Inside Games Daily. We really appreciate you spending your time with us on these episodes. We've done 2 episodes today, so if you were able to watch our other episode, thank you very much for doing that. We also have a Patreon if you want to support us making more content, hanging out with Brian Garr more. That's really fun for us to do. So you could support us on our Patreon there, or just keep watching our videos, subscribing to the channel, and telling your friends about Inside Games.